You're gonna send your music off to a professional mixer for the first time ever. So what do you need to ask? What do you include? What goes into the folder for the mixer? Here is 10 tips-ish to get you prepared to send your music to a professional for the first time. Now, before we begin, a little disclaimer. Not every mixer wants the same things. Increasingly more and more people are mixing in different DAWs, like it's not just all Pro Tools anymore. So you need to communicate with your mixer. And I can't stress that enough. But knowing what to communicate is a very big deal. So these pertain mostly to knowing how to ask your mixer what he needs and what to get him when he asks for those things. The first tip, the first point, the first thing, whatever it is you need to ask, is your song actually done? I can't count how many times I've gotten sessions from people where they're like, yes, this is ready to be mixed. And then I start mixing it. And then a week later, they're like, actually, can you add in this vocal? Actually, can you add in this? Can you add in this? You can't do that to your mixer and expect them to have consistently effective results because we mixed based on what's there. And so if you add something later, you might be throwing a wrench into our whole design. Now, sometimes it's as easy as just swapping one for one and whatever, but you want to be done with your music before you send it to a mixer. A mixer's job isn't to arrange your music. It's not to put it together in a way that sounds pleasing. A mixer's job is to enhance the creative elements that you have done and to make it sound as professional as it can sound. Number 2 is a pretty important question, and this will determine all of the rest of the things that you need to prepare. And that is, which DAW is your mixer using and which DAW are you using? If you are in Pro Tools and your mixer's in Pro Tools, a lot of times, most mixers will say, just send me your Pro Tools session. It doesn't matter whether we have the plugins or not. If we don't have them, we will probably find them, but more than likely we have them already because most mixers have acquired a lot of plugins just for this exact reason. Now, sometimes if you are in Pro Tools and they're in Pro Tools, they might ask you to just freeze all your tracks so that they can unfreeze them as necessary. And if they need to do something to them, then they will. If your mixer is in a different DAW than you, then you are going to have to export your files. And if you have to export your files, that's what most of the rest of this is going to pertain to. And I'm going to assume that this is pretty often the case, because even if you are in the same DAW, the mixer may ask you to export your files just because of, plugins and system use and all the things. Number 3, export only the tracks that you are using. Only the tracks that you are using. Only the tracks that you are using. Don't export empty tracks. Don't export reverbs that aren't being used. Don't export delays that aren't being used. I'm looking at you, Ableton and Logic users who go to the menu and just click export all files as audio and then just drop that into a folder to send to a mixer. That is going to waste a ton of time. A ton of time. Because we have to go through and see, is this something that you accidentally bounced and didn't intend to send? Is this something that is supposed to be there and isn't actually on the file? It creates more problems and more questions. The more time we have to spend unfucking your issues, the less time we have to actually solve the mix and make it sound good. Next is organization. Name all of your files. Make sure all of your files are named. Audio.dupe.01.dupe.06 does not help me. If I have to go through and listen to every single thing before I can even start organizing them in any way, again, it takes away from the time that I can spend being creative. Make sure that you name your tracks and make sure that you put them all together and sometimes, if necessary, subgroup your folders so that they make sense. Drums in one folder, instruments in another folder, vocals in another folder, so that we can organize them much quicker. The next piece goes along with exporting, and that is to make sure that you are exporting at your native sample rate and bit depth. If a mixer asks you to send them something other than what you worked at, You need to question whether that person knows what they're talking about, because most mixers do not want you to change your sample rate in order to give them your files. If you recorded at 44.1, there is no point in upsampling it to 48. There's no new information. If you recorded everything into your session at 44.1, nothing changes by upsampling it. So make sure that you confirm with your mixer that the native sample rate and bit depth is good for them as well. Most of the time they will say yes, unless there's some sort of extenuating circumstance. If you're tired of your music sounding amateur, and no matter what you do when you're recording, it doesn't seem to come out as professional as you expect it, it's time for you to check out the Greazy Does It Principles of Recording course. It's over 20 hours of instruction. It will help you start getting your sounds right at the source and stop relying on plugins to fix it in the mix. So check out the Greazy Does It Principles of Recording course now. The next tip is make sure that you are printing vital sounds. That means that if you put a dotted eighth note delay on a specific sound, don't make your mixer try and recreate that dotted eighth note sound. Print that sound with it in it and send it to them, or at least as a second file to say, this is this thing's delay. Don't make your mixer try and recreate things that you have created in your session. When you do that, you make it harder for them because they have to make a lot of guesses. Unless it's something very specific that you can tell them, like decapitator at 3 with the punish knob on at 80%, there's no point in trying to make them recreate that sound. Give them the mix that you want to hear. The next tip, if you're unsure of a sound, I often tell people, go ahead and send me a clean sound and a process sound, but make sure I know which one is which, and let me know in advance that there is clean or process sounds. Sometimes it may be a situation where you have a reverb on something, but you don't particularly like it, but you want the mixer to put a reverb on that. So you can say, here is the process sound, but please use your own reverbs for this because I don't like the sound that exists. That way they have a guess at least to what you were looking for in the sound. Again, the next tip, organization. Make sure that your files are organized. Make sure that they say the name of the song, your name, the key of the song, and the BPM. This is all information that will be incredibly useful for the future. And if they can save themselves the time, especially if your BPM is something weird like 129.384, which I've had before, make sure that they know that so they don't spend all this time trying to figure out why it doesn't fit. All right, tip number 9, I think. I'm not entirely sure, but I'll find out when I edit this video. Tip number 9 is if you are sending the session, make sure that you remove extraneous information that has no bearing on the session. It is so incredibly frustrating to me to get a session from somebody that has a bunch of empty tracks in it for no reason. If you used a template, if you have something in there that wasn't being used in that template, you're just cluttering up and confusing the mixer. Again, the easier you make it for your mixer, the better that mix can turn out. The last tip for sending things to a mixer is probably the most important, and it's the first thing I started with, but I want to expand on it more. Communicate with the person mixing your music. Sometimes, me personally, I send very simple sessions for mixers to mix, but I will still include a note inside of the session folder saying, hey, this is some information that you might find helpful. Don't worry about this. Try this. Make sure this is good. A lot of times when you're sending it to a professional mixer, they have an assistant that's setting things up. And that information may be vital to that assistant being able to make good decisions that get the mix set up properly. Also, include good contact information for yourself. Even if you've spoken to the mixer, throw in there a phone number and an email address where you can be contacted for any questions, because it's just going to make somebody's life that much easier down the road. Imagine every time you send a session, what would I want to see when I open this session? And that will help you make sure that your session is clean and prepared for the next person who opens it. Here's a bonus tip for you as well. If you are exporting files from your DAW, make sure that they all start at the exact same point. If you start them at different places, you won't be able to line them up and they'll have to guess where they belong. If you're not sure if you've done this right, try to import all of your multitracks into another session and see if the song still plays back the way that you left it. It should, and if it doesn't, you screwed something up and you need to do it again. Make sure to include a final bounce of where you were at when you finished sending it to the mixer. That will help them to determine if there's elements missing and also give them a sense of where you are going with your sound. It makes it a lot easier if they have something to compare to. If you have questions about other situations that you've encountered when trying to prepare things for mixes, leave them down in the comments and I'll answer them. And remember, the better job you do before you send it to a mixer, the better the mix is going to come back.